Hey guys, today for episode number 90, we are back with Dr. Beth Capici. She is a beautiful, fun, godly psychologist who also has ADHD, so she is my people. If you haven't listened to part one of our interview, head back to episode number 89, then jump back on here to hear us talk about some strategies for our lives, not just personally, but also spiritually, because attention deficit can really wreak some havoc on our walk with God if we let it. It's going to be a fun and informative chat, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So listen in. Do you feel like you've been given a raw deal? Like maybe things did not go the way you'd imagined, or like you're struggling at times to just hang on to the faith that you wholeheartedly believe in? Well, my friend, you have come to the right place, and you are not alone. I'm Shelly Sneed, your host of Unperfect, and it's my weekly mission to inspire women just like you and me to persevere in faith through authentic stories and experiences that are rooted in the truth of God's Word. So hang on. Hope and probably some humor are coming up. You mentioned some. Are there any other things you want to mention that may set someone apart as having ADD or ADHD?
Yeah. Well, that list you just gave was really good because I was like, that's part of the criteria. That's part of the criteria. Like not finishing things you start. And really the overall description of it is avoidance of or dislike of things that require sustained mental effort. So avoiding or disliking things that just require a lot of effort for you. Like my friend that thinks cutting up the bell pepper is a lot of effort, but she can go to med school, and, my mother is where I definitely think I got my ADHD, and she's also a therapist, but she was probably a little bit more conscientious as a student than I was. And I'm more, I don't know if conscientious is the right word, but I'm less overwhelmed by kitchen and domestic stuff. Like she'll go, oh, that's a lot of work. And I'm like, it's not really that much work. So she has ADHD a little bit more like my friend that's the doctor. But I have the hyperactivity. So this goes with one of the questions that you asked, which might be a helpful distinction. But everybody that has ADD has to have the inattention or the inconsistent attention. And so that's why it's called attention deficit disorder. But if you have the hyperactivity and the impulsivity as well, then that's where the H comes from. So I do have that. I don't think my mom has that. Like I hate waiting in lines. I fidget with my hair constantly. I've done that since high school at least. And so it's a lot of like trouble sitting still, trouble staying seated for a long time, trouble waiting in line, kind of having higher energy. Like kids, when you're younger, you might climb on your seat in class or you're just like wild on the playground. So that's the reason ADD versus ADHD. They'll kind of say inattentive type or combined type if you have both. And I have the combined type. So
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm guessing I do too. But definitely the highly distracted, easily distracted. I think of that dog on Up that's like squirrel.
Yeah,
like that is
definitely.
That is me.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I had to get off social media. So let's just go there because, one of the questions I was thinking through is what can you say to help people with this? And you're like, well, do you mean before they know they're diagnosed or to get? And I was like, oh yeah, that's all part of this, isn't it? So what would you recommend if let's say someone's listening now and they're like, okay, y'all are looking in the window into my home, into my life.
Right.
This is me. What would be like a first step? What do you think is an important
that's a
thing to do?
Really great question. I think to me, understanding ourselves, I call it our user's guide or our user's manual. Like, I think we really need to understand and try to be at peace with who we are and how God has designed us, strengths and weaknesses. And I like to say that, if you're really, really, really organized, chances are you're not really spontaneous. And if you're really, really spontaneous, you're probably not super organized. But there are people in the middle. I mean, it's a continuum.
Sure.
But I think that going back to your question about strengths, I think just to say, let's own, hey, I want to understand myself. What am I here for? What am I really good at? How can I delegate what I'm not good at or try to work on it a little bit more? And, but just be at peace with your package deal, is what I call it, of strengths and
Sure.
weaknesses. So I do think that it's really helpful to be able to pinpoint what's going on, and kind of like I think you were saying, and this is what my client yesterday was, and her mom, it was like, this makes so much sense of my past and my present, and it helps me think through my future. So I do think it's really good to know when you have it. And people can have traits and not meet the full criteria, but
Sure.
generally with a lot of these diagnostic criteria, you have to have about 60%, like more than half, but not all, to warrant the diagnosis. So I do, think maybe doing a checklist online would be good. And if it seems like, whoa,
Mm,
this sounds like I have it, then you could, call a therapist or just look around and ask around, like who does ADD testing. It can be pretty expensive if insurance doesn't cover it. Um,
right.
and most doctors won't give you medication, especially a stimulant like a class C, I think is, I should know this, but class C, I
Right.
think is the stuff that you could sell on the street. That's like fast acting. And I think Dr.
Right.
William Dodson would say that stimulants would be his favorite choice of medical classes, but there are non-stimulant
Mm,
medications that can work well for ADHD, or even off label. Like sometimes Wellbutrin is a well-known like antidepressant that has been shown to help with ADD a little bit because it has two neurotransmitters in there that it helps, and one of them is dopamine, which is often lacking for people with ADHD. I asked a
mm,
psychiatrist friend of mine a good 10 or 12 years ago. I said, hey, like, I recently diagnosed myself with ADHD, and I said, what do you usually prescribe? And he goes, I have ADHD too. He said, I just use coffee. So then, and I love
interesting.
coffee. So I
Yeah, I
was
do
like,
too.
maybe I could just keep doing that. Plus, I'm doing what I love. So I do have a little trouble staying up with paperwork, but I don't have trouble focusing in counseling because I love it.
Mm,
So it's like
right.
that. You can get
Yeah.
in a real flow and pay attention when you're enjoying something and you find it interesting. So
Right.
I don't, so I do, I did try some medication, but I never got in a great groove with it because of my coffee, honestly. And she was like, you got to be careful with the
Right.
stimulant and coffee. And I got anxious about, like, what if
Yeah.
my heart's like, I think she was
Right.
just saying take it a couple hours after your caffeine, but your coffee. But
Mm,
so there are some holistic things that could help. I think probably just depends on how disruptive it is in your life, and it really can impact relationships a lot. I read a really good
sure.
article. It was called something like Five Common Pitfalls of an ADHD Relationship. And, I have seen clients where, their marriage was really on the rocks. And I think a lot of it was ADD related. Um, so I think when it's disrupting your job or your relationships, significantly, you really, really need to work, like figure out some treatment.
Sure.
But yeah, people could Google holistic things just to see. I mean, I think omega 3s or fish oil has been known to be helpful, and some, mushrooms or adaptogens have been shown to be helpful. One of my adult clients who's around my age said that nootropic drinks were really helpful for her. I think it's nootropic drinks. And they probably have, some of those adaptogens and mushrooms and things like that. But sometimes people could seem ADHD and they may just not be eating very well, like kids that are getting too much, like red food
Mm,
dye, or just eating way too much sugar.
yes.
So I would, want people to look into any potential medical reasons that they're having trouble focusing. Um, but, cognitive behavioral therapy would definitely be one of the better types of therapy.
Mhm.
maybe having a life coach or an executive life coach or a therapist that specializes in like executive kind of functioning and helping people have game plans and
Right.
schedules and lists and strategies.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, my therapist, I probably see her about once a month, or when I'm in crisis
Uh-huh.
mode or whatever, we might meet more often.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's constantly like giving me, what do you, why do you need to say yes to that? What do you need to say no to? What would it
Right.
look like for you? She's very good at doing some of that coaching when I'm not able to pinpoint what are the actual things I'm doing that are actually hurting myself, or kicking myself in the
Yes.
foot because,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so
You're
yes, it's always good
overcommitting
to
and
have someone else that can speak life into you. And I found it can't always be your spouse. My husband
right.
and I, we've gotten a lot better. Like we are a lot better. We can lovingly say, "Hey, I'm noticing this now." But I do think what you were saying a minute ago, I think part of we're very, his mother always says, I've never seen two people that are more polar opposite than the two of you. Like it's amazing that y'all been married for 30 years.
Uh-huh.
But I know some of it's the way we're wired, like just
Yeah.
because you really can't understand. I can't understand why he's, that low on the empathy scale. Like, how can you not? And he can't understand, how can you not accomplish A, B, and C on your list, on your daily
Yes.
list or whatever? It's just,
Yes.
you really can't see the other person's perspective because you've
Exactly.
got yours. So,
Yeah, because what's easy
yeah,
for you seems like it should be easy for him, and to him what's easy for him seems like it should be easy for you. Like,
right, right.
why doesn't this
Yeah,
come naturally?
absolutely.
That's funny.
Yeah. I'm under the impression I'm of the assumption that nothing in marriage comes naturally, like
Oh,
except attraction. Like
yes.
but
It's so hard.
could just be because we've been so different. Sure.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because I I think I mentioned that my husband has ADHD as well, I'm pretty sure. Like, and he's kind of come around. He hasn't been diagnosed or tested, but I'm pretty sure he's come
Right.
around to going, oh, yeah, I guess I probably do. But his is different, manifests differently because he has a little more OCD about certain, like the way he chops vegetables is so perfect. And he'll watch
Right.
me when I cook and he's like, why don't you clean up your messes as you go? And I'm like, I just want to get the dinner done quickly and I
Right.
don't want to stop and like clean, pots and pans. It's going to slow me down. And, or he'll say, why don't you just
Sure.
finish one thing? Why have you started like 5 projects and you didn't finish any of them? So,
Right.
but there are times I wish he and I were different because neither of us is good at planning. And I think I probably, should have tried to find somebody who's a little better at planning since I'm not good at it. So, but
Right.
you can have more
Yeah.
friction when you think so differently. So,
Yeah.
uh,
That's true.
yeah,
That is definitely true.
it's funny.
So here is a interesting question, or I think it's interesting
Uh huh.
because I feel like in my own life the weaknesses of my ADHD, that my ADHD posed in my life can have had obvious impacts on my life as a follower of Jesus.
Uh huh.
Like I'll spend more time picking out the pretty Bible, the scripture reading plan, the highlighters, whatever.
Yeah.
But the actual sitting down to do it is hard. I have a trouble quieting my mind.
Oh,
I've been focusing a lot this year on silence, before I
yes.
pray and that kind of stuff. And I mean, whoa, is that hard anyway in today's culture? But just to quiet my mind and body to be present with
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is very, very hard. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or strategies that would help me or our listeners in this
Yeah.
area, which I'm sure will overflow into many areas of our life.
Yes. And I so relate like 1,000%. Like, it's so hard for me to be still and sit. And I know that that's what I need, but it's so hard for me to sit and pray. I'll get distracted when I pray. Um,
Right.
so I do really, really, really relate. What I feel like is my best advice, even though it is a struggle for me, is to, maybe try to have a routine. Like if you're a morning person or if you just block out an hour at work or, try to make it somewhat routine. I think that could help. I'm terrible at routines though, so I'm not good at that
Right.
part. But I think my favorite advice really would be to try to figure out a creative way to make it more interesting for you, whether that be like talking to a friend or finding a Bible study or a book that just resonates with you. This kind of reminds me of what I share with clients when I'm trying to figure out a meditation or relaxation that helps them, because some people would like a deep breathing exercise, and someone else would say, I'd rather do a mindfulness exercise, or I'd rather visualize the beach and do a visualization. And so some just get distracted or find things boring. And so I'm like, just find the
Right.
one that you like. I personally think that most ADHD people do better when they have to sort of engage with it a little bit and it's not just passive.
Sure.
So,
Right.
I definitely have found it to be fun to, if there is a good Bible study, that's great. But if there isn't a specific Bible study, to maybe find a verse and read it in different versions, like the New International Version or the King James or the Message version, and kind of see, oh, like this is what this means. Or if there's a term that you don't know or a verse that doesn't make sense, to like look at a commentary. That's why I love phones and internets now, is you can say, what does it mean when Jesus said this?
Yeah.
Or what does this word mean? And it's so fun. Like, wow, like this is what that means.
Yes,
So,
I can totally relate to that. And I'm having a love-hate relationship with it because you're describing me to a T. And that
uh-huh.
some of my times of reading scripture that have been so rich of when I've gone, what? And I look up what was the Greek word there? Da, 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 da. I
Yes.
just have to be very careful that I don't also go, oh, someone texted me. Like I have to be really careful that I'm
Right.
using it for that and then putting it down. But that does make it so
Yes.
much richer when you can. It's almost like you're giving us permission to chase down that rabbit trail, because I'm still being with Jesus, and I'm still looking into his word
Yeah.
and hearing from him. So
Yeah, making it come alive and making it interactive. Like, I think that because so many educational systems, including, like, not that the church is exactly an educational system, but they don't use the right methods for people with ADHD. Um, they're
right,
not the ideal learning styles. But so I like it when a speaker asks maybe a rhetorical question, or asks actual question if you're in a Sunday school class or something, and you have to think, like, why do you think Jesus said this? Or, you know, why do you think
right,
that Peter betrayed Jesus 3 times? Like, and it just makes it come alive. So that's probably a good way to put it.
sure,
Any way that works for you. And my dad was sharing something with me recently about how a lot of people in earlier times would write hymns together. And I was like, who
mm,
would have ever thought, like, you could write poems on your own or with a friend, or you could write hymns? Like, I think that would be,
right,
or teaching it to someone else. They say the best way to teach, I mean, to learn is to teach something. So if I was being asked to teach a Bible study on Ephesians or something, I would really get involved with it a lot more than I would if I was just passively reading it for a
right,
school assignment.
right. I think we ADHDers do really well with accountability, because
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah.
sister, my daughter-in-law just recently had asked me if I would do something for her for a Christmas gift. And I said, yes, I will, but you need to give me a date that you need it by. Because if you
Yeah.
don't, I'll wait till December 24th, and then I'll be like, yeah,
That's so
So
funny.
I was like,
Yeah.
give me an end date. But if you kind of got the accountability of other people that I'm going to be sharing with, or like a
Yes.
Bible study meeting with.
That reminds me of another great strategy. I think that if I was trying to do a chapter in some Bible study book, I was recently doing a Bible study on Philippians, which I absolutely loved. It's called At His Feet, is the group. It's 2 ladies. So, so good. But if I said, oh, I'm going to try to get through chapter 4 sometime Saturday morning, I would probably take a couple hours and not get it done. But if I said, I've got 30 minutes, I got to get this done in 30 minutes, like a deadline, or before I leave, I'm not going to leave the house to go run errands until I finish this, I probably would be much more likely to focus and finish it.
Sure.
And that's kind of why procrastination acts almost like an ADD medication, because it's boring, it's torture, you're overwhelmed, you're probably making it harder than it has to be, and you're distracted. And then suddenly you're like, this is due in 2 hours. And you get this stimulation, like a stimulant, a dopamine rush of this is exciting. And now suddenly I am like all in and I am cranking it out. It's probably not the best work, but I'm at least cranking it out.
Right.
And being really efficient. So that deadline thing probably would help. I do a lot of strategies like that with even cleaning. Like I've even set up fake people coming to visit. Like that's the wrong way to put it, but I would call a neighbor and say, could you stop by here in 20 minutes? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, I just need to get some cleaning done. And I'm going to get so much more done if I know you're coming. So then I'm like, crank
that makes me so happy. You just don't know how happy that makes me that you said that. My husband's big joke is when he's ready for the house to be cleaned, he invites people over because he knows that's the only thing that will make me do it. But it got so bad that if I asked one of the kids, hey, I need you to go clean the whatever bathroom, they're like, oh, who's coming over? I'm like, no, we live here. We should be doing this.
My kids haven't
modeled that very well.
Yeah. It makes it more interesting and more important and time sensitive, and it gets your wheels going. That's so funny.
That is funny. Okay. So strategy number 10 is invite people over every day.
Beth, thank you so much for being on Unperfect. You have just provided so much insight into this topic, and I so appreciate your vulnerability and just your time.
This has been so much fun, Shelley. Thank you so much for having me, and I will look forward to having you on my podcast soon.
I can't wait. Y'all head over to the Never Perfect podcast and Never Perfect Faith to hear more from Dr. Beth, and not just on ADHD, but she also interviews some really cool people on a range of topics with a range of stories that I know you'll find really interesting. As we wrap up today, let me give you some ideas to think about and maybe some things to put into practice this week, okay? So number 1, if you or somebody that you love struggles with any of the traits that we've talked about, it doesn't necessarily mean it's automatically ADHD. So just as Beth suggested, I do recommend you talk with a licensed counselor or your healthcare provider, because there's a host of other things that could be impacting your attention, like thyroid issues or depression. I am not a doctor. I just happen to have both depression and thyroid issues, and they are listed on the Mayo Clinic site among some other diagnoses that could be going on in you or your loved one's life that has similar traits as ADHD. So all I'm saying is get it checked out, girl. Don't wait until you and your spouse have fought over the same things for 29 years. I'm totally speaking hypothetically here, y'all. Or until you're about to kill the 19-year-old that is still living in your home, who's left the food out all night for the 269th time in a row. Also another hypothetical situation I'm speaking of. Okay, number 2, I want to speak into your spiritual life, because that's the whole point of this podcast, strengthening your faith in the midst of the hard, the now, and the not yet, like we talk about. So I challenge you to try some new things in your time with Jesus this week if you're feeling like a failure there. Beth mentioned some routines, freeing yourself from distractions. For me, it means getting up earlier than everyone else in the morning and getting my phone the heck away from me. It may mean for you finding an accountability partner, someone you can check in with once a day or a few times a week with a tidbit of what you're learning or what to pray about. It might be joining a Bible study with others where there's homework. I'm not trying to make this a legalistic thing for you or me. I just want us consistently in the Word and in the presence of a God who chases after us and wants to meet with us, even those of us with 24 tabs open in our brains. Oh my gosh. I said that to my husband the other day, y'all. I don't even know what we were talking about, but I was like, I've got way too many tabs open in my brain. And Mr. I've never been distracted in my life until I married you said, well, can you close some of them? No, dear, I can't. I just can't. But let's take the next right step toward embracing the parts of us that bring life and joy to the world and to our ministries, but also make a change where we need to order something in our life that's just out of control. I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me at hello@shellysneed.com and tell me how it's going, what you're learning about yourself, or even how you're struggling. I would love to pray for you. If you also would, please click on that rating for me, whatever podcast platform you're using. If you would give us here at the podcast a high rating so that other unperfect folks like us can find the podcast. A review would literally make you my superhero, like this one from Teresa, who said, Shelly shares words of truth and hope with a heart of humility and a dash of humor. I'm just happy there are folks out there who get my slice of humor. As always, guys, I'm praying that you are able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life this week. I'll see you next time.